What is your favourite game? And what genre is it, if you know? More than likely, it's a mix of genres. A dual genre game, if you will. Do they work well together? Well, today I'm going to discuss what a dual genre is and how it affected the industry. But to do that, we must start at the beginning with a dual genre game, simply put, is a game that takes aspects of two different genres and mixes them together into one game. Games didn't always have two genres that they were made with, which I know may be hard to imagine with how common it is today with games. A good example of one without one would be the original Super Mario Bros. For the NES, a simple platformer game, but still wildly popular. This changed as gaming progressed and more ideas, new ideas, were needed to make games stick out, so game designers started to combine aspects from different genres into one. So let's have a look at that. A good example of this would be the Arma series. The Arma series is a first-person shooter, tactical shooter/military simulator game by Bohemia Interactive. I chose this as an example as it's an older game series which has been going on for a long time and shows how game genres have slowly changed as technology has allowed it to, by allowing more game devs to implement more and more features, allowing the dual genre to really be born, and the advancement of technologies within the gaming industry is the reason they're able to be done so well and easily nowadays. An example of a game that's more recently released, and my personal favourite game, is Cult of the Lamb, a cute little game based on the idea of the lamb to the slaughter religion, except this lamb gains godlike powers and runs a cult in his image. Fun, right? The reason this has become one of my favourite games as of recent is due to two wildly different genres that the developers Massive Monster have made work together so well, being a base building / resource management aspect of a game and a roguelike dungeon crawling aspect of the game, that all go hand in hand and mesh together very, very well.
What is your favourite combination of genres, and what's an example of a game you play or enjoy with it?
I think my favourite combination of genres is probably, I really like games that combine roguelike with anything. So like one of my favourites is a roguelike shooter combination, and that's in Risk of Rain 2. It really adds a lot to the gameplay.
Now, I couldn't talk about dual genre games and not compare it to another form of media that also uses it: films. It's a good way to show comparison and help more people understand the topic, so I thought, why not talk about it too? In film, this topic has a slightly different name, being hybrid genre, but has the exact same meaning. A good example of a film that is a hybrid genre would be Hot Fuzz, a movie I very much enjoy, released in 2007. It is an action, comedy, and police parody film, combining all the different aspects into one film very well, and making it actually enjoyable to watch. It allows the film to have both serious and light-hearted tones simultaneously, making the film more enjoyable to watch, in my opinion anyways. Most films nowadays have many different genres in them, more than people realise until they search them up and see, as they have become the norm in this day and age. With some genres only being done alongside others, as people know they work, so they think they shouldn't change it to stay successful. This, however, is why I believe that the topic is done differently between the media.
What is your favourite example of a hybrid genre film, and why?
My favourite example would probably be a very obvious one, which would be Shaun of the Dead, which mixed many genres, horror being one of them, but even within horror there's subgenres, so in this case it was a zombie film, but it was also mixed with the comedy genre and also with the romantic comedy genre, so they kind of created a whole new subgenre called the rom-zom-com, which obviously was a good way of selling the film. So it picks up horror fans, picks up comedy fans, and probably along the way picked up the odd romantic comedy fan as well. So it really helped to bring a wider audience together. So I think that would probably be my favourite example. To expand that a little bit, the horror genre in itself is ripe for hybridity, because the very nature of it is kind of like a universal thing within film. So it can bring in science fiction horror, such as Alien. It can bring in vampire, Western horror. There was a film called Vampires, which was made, I think, sort of sometime in the 90s, which, not surprisingly, was about vampires. But it was also set in the Wild West time, so it had like a Western sort of theme to it as well. So I'd say that the horror film, if I had to pick one genre, is absolutely ripe for hybridity. So yeah, I'd go Shaun the Dead, but horror film as a genre really works well with other genres.
What do you believe does dual genre better, film or games, and why?
I think it's a really hard decision to choose between films or games doing dual genres better, because the sort of genres in films and games are quite different. You have shooter games are quite a different, completely stark difference to an action movie. But I think that games do it slightly better. I think that's because I enjoy games more as a medium. It's more interactive, and the genres give me a more expansive choice of things to do.
There are many differences and similarities within films and games when it comes to genres and how they're approached. Some differences, for example, could be between action shooter games and action shooter/war films. As within games, they are mainly done to make you, the player, feel like the main character, and that you have a genuine effect on the story. Whereas in film, it is very rarely ever shown from a first-person perspective, like in games, and is always an outside or spectator perspective of the action, which is a vast difference between the two media. On the other hand, similarities can be seen as well. For example, within horror films and games, a lot of techniques are used within both. Like the fear frequency, infrasound, is so low that the human ear can't actually detect it, making the player or viewer subconsciously feel immense unease or a feeling of impending doom. This is used in both films and games as it works so well at creating the atmosphere in both, even if used in different amounts in different situations. Dual genres, however, are very much so done differently in both media, due to having them being presented in different ways, limiting how similar they can be and how prominent they have to be in games compared to film. Games have a very obvious genre when playing, and players can easily distinguish the genres while playing, whereas in film, some films that people have watched could be in genres they didn't even realise, as the film only mainly presents one or two of the genres that is in the film. What do you believe does dual genre better, film or games? Why?
Well, not being a gamer, I'd have to say film, although obviously in games I can see that there is examples. And again, it probably brings in the same elements of what I mentioned before about the horror genre, that a lot of the games are built around fantasy and things that aren't really real, which I suppose is the whole point of gaming, is about fantasy. So it can open itself up to many other genres, but I would say probably film, from my point of view, it helps producers come up with new ideas, it helps audiences stay engaged with films, and allows for a lot more creativity. So personally, I'd say film, but I'm sure somebody else will say games, and somewhere in the middle will be the truth, that it pays to have any genre or any platform. If they can cross over, they're maximising their reach and their potential, and ultimately their profits. So I would say film, but I can understand why games would also be chosen.
Conclusion. So I'll go back to the starting question I had. What is your favourite game? Hopefully after this you'll understand a bit better on why the genres you enjoy work together and how it all started. Overall, the main reasoning behind covering this topic was to see if there was a reason some genres work well together and why some don't, how they have evolved and come to be so popular, and how it is different within different media. And I believe I covered most of that in this video. The way dual genre in games and in films is evolving still, with how technology is changing and improving every day, with limitations being broken that couldn't be even 5 years ago, is honestly astonishing of how quickly it is changing. In the esports industry even, dual genre games are becoming much more popular within competitive games such as Valorant, a CSGO styled game being in the same format, with each operator having separate abilities, combining the two aspects very well and creating a good competitive game and a fresh way to compete. That is all I have for this, however. Thank you for watching and listening to me.